Welcome to the Divorce Talk with Twyla Show, where we talk all things divorce, and you will be inspired, informed, encouraged, and empowered. Now, let's welcome our host, Twyla M. Marks, the divorce recovery expert. She is Coach Twyla, the Get Your Happy Back Divorce Coach.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Twyla M. Marks. I am the divorce recovery expert, aka Coach Twyla, the Get Your Happy Back Divorce Coach. Thank you all so very much for tuning in on tonight. And listen, tonight's show or today's show, whatever time you're going to be watching this, but we are live on tonight. It is all about divorce mediation. And I have an amazing special guest on tonight. She is family law attorney Rosemarie Ferrante. She helps families transition smoothly, y'all, through the divorce process with divorce mediation. So let's welcome Miss Rosemarie Ferrante to Divorce Talk with Twyla.
Hey, Twyla, how are you?
I'm good. How are you on tonight?
I'm good, thank you. So nice to see you.
Yes, same here. Likewise. Thank you so much for joining me on tonight and graciously accepting the invitation to be a guest on Divorce Talk with Twyla. So, Rosemarie, I know a lot of my guests, this is the Divorce Talk with Twyla show, and the majority of my guests have experienced divorce. And like yourself and like myself, I'm divorced now 14 years. It was very tumultuous, very adversarial. And I know tonight we're going to talk from a totally different perspective as it relates to divorce. But if you want to share a little bit about your personal story, however much you wish to share, and then we'll dive right on into the divorce mediation process, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Sounds good. So my background is in litigation. When I started practicing family law in the 90s, I litigated in Lower Fairfield County in Connecticut with some pretty aggressive litigators. And at the time, I was a young woman just getting married. And it never felt right to me.
Okay.
It never felt right to me, you know, these depositions that I was taking part of and these court hearings. Fast forward, almost 20 years, I stopped litigating and I started practicing non-adversarial divorce because I do believe families can get through the process in a smooth manner if they're informed, if they have the information they need, and if they have the right professionals guiding them. Around the time when I opened my own practice is when my marriage was ending. So I'm also divorced, and I've been divorced for about 7 years now. I've got 3 children. We were married a long, long time. And when it was clear that we were going to be divorcing, you know, we said, we didn't do marriage well. Let's at least try to do divorce well. And that's what we tried to do. Was it perfect? No. It's a process. It's always a process. But you know, I think that we did a pretty decent job, and we're still co-parenting. We have 3 children together. So so that's sort of my background with my own personal divorce. And you know, you learn through that process as well. And I think it makes you a better divorce professional too, having gone through it, because no divorce is void of emotion. And there's those 3 pieces, right? The emotional, financial, and legal. And sometimes the legal is the least important of the 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I would concur. And so, you know, a lot of people, Rosemarie, I feel like when we say the word divorce has a negative connotation, and right now, you know, as a family law attorney, the divorce rates are just astronomical, right? There's so many people going through divorce, and so many people that probably have so many emotions involved. I mean, divorce comes with a myriad of emotions, but it doesn't have to be adversarial. I know I talked to one guest of mine a few months ago, actually, And he told me that they went to counseling first. And I want to talk about that, because when you do that, it kind of removes the emotions from it all, right? You go to counseling first. Don't go seek legal counsel first. Get through the emotional piece of it
Yes.
first. And then let's talk about the legal aspect. So that just is a segue into what you do on a daily basis. How do you counsel prospective clients or clients that obviously hire you to share with them that this divorce doesn't have to be adversarial?
Right. So you nailed it. The emotional homework is imperative.
Yeah.
So, when I have a consultation, I meet with both spouses. Now,
Oh,
typically one spouse is a few steps ahead of the other. That's
mhm.
typical, but it's very different if one is divorce ambivalent. And
Mhm.
I can see that. And when I see that, I talk to them about discernment counseling, and we could talk a little bit more about that. But
Yeah.
the thing that I tell people is legal really is your last stop. If you want a non-adversarial divorce process and you want to transition your family through the process in as smooth a manner as possible, it's all in the prep work. And the
Yeah.
prep work is the emotional prep work and the financial prep work. And so when I meet with people, I'm usually seeing them in crisis mode because
Yeah.
everyone thinks the first stop is the lawyer.
Hmm.
And, when we have a discussion, particularly again, if I see that somebody is divorce ambivalent, I talk about what steps they can take to get on the same page. The last thing you want to do is drag someone through the divorce process or
Yeah.
be dragged through it, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Mm.
So, discernment counseling is probably one of the therapies that your prior guest had talked about. And discernment counseling is for couples in crisis, not marriage counseling, not really to, fix the marriage, but for couples who know that this is going to happen, but
Yes.
they both need to get on the same page so they can proceed with clarity and they can proceed with, an understanding of, yes, this is going to happen, but this is how we are going to do it. And it's the yes, this is going to happen part
Yeah.
that takes the longest to get to. Once you get there, then
Yeah.
then everybody, if you're both on the same page with why you are where you are, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean there's no more emotions attached to it. But if you're both at the same place emotionally, yes, we're ready, yes, we're going to proceed, and this is how we want to do it, then you can move forward without the combat. And I don't know if I said this already, but conflict is inevitable, but
Yes.
combat is optional. And so you have to keep that in mind, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love that, because you're right. And so, a lot of people, legal is their first stop, and it probably shouldn't be, right? If you want a non-adversarial divorce process, it shouldn't be. We got to deal with the emotional piece of it first. So I like the fact that you said you talk to both spouses.
I do.
So how does that normally work out?
Yeah,
Moving forward, I mean, they've made a
mhm.
decision at this point. They're going to end the marriage, resolve the marriage, and move forward. How does that normally work out?
Yeah, so that I always have consultations with both spouses. Now, remember, I never litigate, so I'm not giving any independent legal advice. Now, if somebody calls me and says, I'm just interested in working with you as a review counsel because I'm mediating with another mediator, sure, I'll meet with them alone. But when I get an initial call from somebody,
Mhm.
I talk to them about I'll do a brief intro call, give them a little primer on mediation and also collaborative divorce, which is another option for a non-adversarial divorce process.
Yeah.
And then I ask them if they and their spouse are on the same page. And usually they are, because usually people who are calling me both want to mediate. And
Mhm.
so I'll have the meeting together, so that they can ask me any questions that they need. And I can explain the process and they're getting the same message. And then I'm also looking out for red flags. Or is this the
Mhm.
is this a couple that I think is suited for mediation? Is there something I see that maybe they would be better suited for a collaborative divorce?
Yeah.
And then we can talk a little bit about that prep work because, again, if that's not done initially, and everyone's team is different, right? So maybe I'm seeing that they are going to have real co-parenting issues, and they're talking about they've had disagreements about the children, and they don't have meeting of the minds on certain things related to the kids. Or maybe one of them doesn't understand the finances. Then we're going to say, do you need a co-parenting counselor? Do you need a certified divorce financial analyst? Independently, what's your emotional support? Do you understand what a divorce coach is? Is that someone who's going to assist you? So we talk about the whole integrative approach. What is the process you both want to proceed with? Is it mediation? Does that make sense? And then additionally, who are the other professionals that you need? And what your family need is going to be different than what your neighbor's family needs.
Absolutely. There's no cookie cutter here.
Right.
Everybody may need something different, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And mediation, it may not work for everyone.
It might not, and there are times where I might see a reason why I would suggest considering collaborative divorce. And, in that instance, it might be people who both feel that they need lawyers with them in real time. There may be a situation where there's some financial questions that would make the mediation process more challenging, and maybe a collaborative divorce process makes the more sense. I always try to keep people in a non-adversarial frame of mind.
Yes.
But that being said, and typically I'm not getting people who need to litigate. Typically the people who are coming to me know my practice is non-adversarial and they both want to proceed that way. So it's very rare that I'm seeing situations where even litigation and formal discovery would be necessary, but sometimes it is.
Yeah. Now, Rosemarie, we may have listeners and viewers on tonight that don't really know what collaborative divorce means or the process. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So I'll kind of tell you how mediation and collaborative are similar, and then how they're different, because they're your options for a non-adversarial divorce process. So in a mediation, you and your spouse are working with one mediator. The mediator may or may not be an attorney. So each state has different rules for mediators. So you want to really understand in your state, does your mediator need to be an attorney? Are therapists or financial professionals able to be mediators? Most states have statewide organizations for non-adversarial divorce. And so I always tell people, look there first, get your information about your state. So in Connecticut, I'm an attorney, but as a mediator, I'm not providing any independent advice. A mediator's job is to help people come to an agreement, facilitate an agreement after they have all the information. Part of that is legal information, and part of it is financial information, and part of it is just their own knowledge of their family circumstances. And so we talk about that, we identify the issues, we identify resources, and we facilitate conversation. That's a mediation process. Ultimately, your mediator, if an attorney, can draft your agreement and submit everything to the court as well. In a collaborative divorce, there's a different team. So you and your spouse each have attorneys in every meeting. Now there's no mediator, it's just two attorneys. You might have a mental health professional or a coach, and you might have a neutral financial. Depends on your family's needs. But that's the team. The goal is the same. You're keeping the court out of it. Those lawyers sign a participation agreement that no one's going to court. Nothing's getting filed. We're going to have meetings. We're still going to explore goals. We're not going to have position-based negotiations. We're going to talk about how do we achieve both spouses' goals as best we can, given the facts and circumstances. And so it's a similar process. It's a different team.
Different team. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. So, and do you find that I know co-parenting and the visitation and all of that is a big deal when we're talking children involved in the divorce, but do you find that couples handle that well as it relates to the visitation schedule? I know I'm in Texas, and every state's different, but here in Texas, the rule of thumb is that every other weekend, and then every week on Thursdays, the non-custodial parent gets to pick the child up from school or a mutual location or whatever. And that's pretty much the process here in Texas. And that's what I went through personally. And so, what do you find with that topic? I mean, do parents agree, or is it all over the place? Because that's a
Yeah,
big one.
there's a big range, but
Yeah.
the beauty of mediating a parenting plan is you have the time, all the time you need to make the best decisions. So we obviously try to focus on the child and not what does mom want and what does dad want, what's best
Yeah.
for the child. And everyone's circumstance is so different. So I had a mediation where we had a 9-week rotation because in that situation, the dad was a shift worker. He was a fireman. And so his schedule changed and it was on a 9-week rotation. So we couldn't do that typical alternate weekends and Thursday night. It would never have worked.
Right.
Right. So we can get very particular and we do that. And, I always start with the parenting plan before we discuss finances.
Oh,
And
that's
we
good.
talk about, how have you co-parented before? Who's made these decisions? Have you had any conflict with regard to education, religion, medical? Usually, I have to say the answer is no for my mediation clients. And
Mhm.
so then, when you start with that, you realize, okay, so on major decisions, you've usually agreed. We know
Mhm.
that when the child or children are with mom, mom's going to make routine decisions.
Yeah.
Go to a friend's house? When can he do his homework? Things like that. But we all know as parents, there's that whole set of intermediate decisions that
Yes.
both parents should be involved in, right? So it's like the curfews and the parties as they get older and driving and
Yeah.
college prep and, these bigger discussions that both parents should be involved in. And so what we always try to do, again, conflict is inevitable. Married people have disagreements.
Right.
Divorced people are going to have disagreements. Divorced parents are going to have disagreements. So let's make sure we have a framework. What happens when you have that disagreement? How are you
Yeah.
guys going to communicate? Is it going to be face to face? Do you do better via text? What if you disagree? Does the child have a say? And so we really kind of break that all down. So
Mhm.
when those things happen and there are disagreements, at least you have a framework for having discussions and trying to work through it.
Yeah. I love what you just mentioned. I'm going to call it the communication method.
Yeah.
Determine what is the method of communication. And, a lot of times some people just can't have a conversation, a face-to-face conversation. It's text, it's email, and for various reasons. And again, there's folks that all are listening, you're watching, there's no cookie cutter.
Right.
Whatever works for you, what works for you may not work for your best friend or your sister or your brother or whomever that may be experiencing the same situation or in the same space of divorce. So wow. So Rosemarie, so you go to they're in mediation or the collaborative divorce. Those decisions have been made. About how long is this process?
Yeah. So it's really dependent on the people, right? And so
Okay.
I'll ask people that. Are we aligned on a timeline? And then I
Yeah.
check in on that timeline as we're going through the process. Some people both want to meet every other week, keep it moving, and they can get done in 4 months or so, 5 months. On the other hand, life gets in the way. And so, we want to make sure that the work is done in between sessions so that the sessions are actually fruitful and effective and efficient. And so, if there's more financial disclosure, or we have to have a conversation with the CPA because there's some tax consequences on something we're discussing, or an asset needs to get appraised, those things may prolong some of our dates. But typically, I would say on average, most mediations that I have are done within 6 months.
Wow.
But I do have some people who, life gets in the way, and they'll get to it when they get to it. And I let them do that. So again, as long as our expectations are aligned, right? And that's one of the things I was going to say back to the parenting plan too. These conversations, while hard for parents to have, are so important, because the more that the co-parents' expectations are aligned, the smoother those little bumps in the road that are going to happen are managed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's good. Is there ever a time where you may suggest or recommend to some clients that this may not be the way to go? Maybe they need to go just the traditional way?
I have to say I haven't seen it except once.
Oh, wow. That's good.
And I didn't like it, but there was no way. They couldn't wrap their heads around mediation. It just wasn't working. And I didn't want them to continue to spin wheels with me. There was no communication. They had gone to a co-parenting counselor on my recommendation. That wasn't helping. It was a very, very difficult divorce. I have, as review counsel, had mediation clients who were heading in a way that I thought was an unfair final agreement. And I made suggestions. And in one particular case, I hated it, but this woman chose to stop the mediation and to litigate. Ultimately, she did end up getting a little bit better of a deal. I had told her she was giving in on something that maybe she wasn't really clear on understanding. So there are certain times where, yes, if you have the right professionals and you have the right information and you can be engaged in the process, ask questions, understands the decisions you're making, it can absolutely be a smooth process. But that's not always possible.
Yeah. I agree. I asked that question because, sometimes, this method may not work for everybody. And I don't want our viewers and listeners to believe that this does work for everybody, because it may not.
It may not. And there are times when it's inappropriate, and so if there is any sort of coercive control, domestic violence, financial betrayal, you're not going to have formal discovery in this process. And although the litigation process is difficult and expensive, you might need that formal discovery to make sure, that all of the assets are disclosed. In mediation and in collaborative, it is voluntary and it's good faith. And that works for some people, but not for others. So, they're really, I think for anyone who's contemplating or in the early stages of divorce, I would suggest meeting with a mediator, meeting with a litigator, and really understanding the differences and really doing a good analysis of your own situation. How do you want to get through this process? And what do you need to get through this process so that you're not only protected, but that your children are as well? And that the end result is going to be the best result for everybody.
Right. That's good. I love that. Wow. Some great information, Rosemarie. So, wow. Time has already flown by so fast. Good conversation. They say when you're having fun. Great conversation. So I would like to ask, as we wrap up, is there any other thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers, with our listeners tonight, as it relates to divorce mediation, collaborative law, like I mentioned earlier on the show, I know right now with the pandemic, the last 2 years, unfortunately, the divorce rates are astronomical. And so many people are going through divorce, contemplating divorce, all of that stuff. But you know what? They will recover. Y'all will recover. I promise you. But you have to be connected to the right person and whatever works best for you and your situation. So if you want to share, Rosemarie, any last thoughts to any of our viewers and listeners at this time, go ahead.
I think you said it exactly right. And people have to understand it's their life and it's their divorce. And so get the professionals who are going to best assist you, but you stay engaged, you understand the process, and don't just put it in a professional's hands. You make sure you understand what they're doing, you ask questions, and you're the director, you're the boss, not them. So, you've got to stay engaged and understand every step of the way what is happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Rosemarie, how can people connect with you through all of your social media platforms? There may be some listeners and viewers out there. They're in Connecticut. They want to connect with you.
You never know. So my website is divorcemediationct.com. I am also on Instagram, Divorce Mediation CT. You can find me under one of Twyla's followers. And I'm also on Facebook, Divorce Mediation Center of Ridgefield, Danbury. And I'm located in Connecticut. And I'm happy to chat with anybody and answer any questions at any time.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Rosemarie, thank you so very much for coming on. I think this is a very important topic, and so many people, it'll save you a lot of money, folks. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
Litigation can be, well, it is very, very expensive, and it can last forever, depending upon what you have going on in your situation. So thank you again so very much for coming on, and I appreciate you, and I'm glad our paths has crossed and we've connected. And all that good stuff.
I want to. Thank you so much, Twyla. Have a great night. I'll see you soon.
You too. Thank you all so very much for tuning in on tonight. And listen, don't forget, next week is the start of an amazing series. It's called The Divorced Saints. We're going to talk about divorce in the church. You don't want to miss this. We're going to talk about it for 3 weeks. I have an amazing guest lined up, powerful, amazing guests. So that starts next Monday night. So folks, until next week, this is Coach Twyla, the Get Your Happy Back Divorce Coach.
What a great show. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, the Divorce Talk with Twyla show is out.